Despite breaking all the rules of cool, fun gaming, Last of Us has spread like, well, hopefully not like spores. Hi, I'm Darrian P. Mack with the Leaderboard, and we're about to load our packs and head out into the post-apocalyptic unknown. So keep your ears peeled for clickers, get those ships crafted, and join us as we check out 107 facts about Last of Us. Before he switched to computer science, Naughty Dog creative director Neil Druckmann studied criminology at the University of Florida. Though he didn't finish the program, it sure seems like he's made use of studying the human mind's darker impulses. The game began way back in 2004 when Druckmann was a grad student at Carnegie Mellon University. His professor was friends with famed horror director George Romero and proposed a group project. Each group pitched a game idea, and Romero, father of the zombie movies, will pick a favorite to be developed. Druckmann's proposal was about a cop with a heart condition protecting a young girl in a city of flesh-eating monsters. Whenever his heart acted up, the role of protector/protected would switch. Romero didn't choose it. But the idea stuck with Druckmann though. And after starting at Naughty Dog, he reworked the idea as The Turning, a self-drawn, self-written 6-issue comic book. He pitched it to an indie publisher who said they liked it, but didn't love it, and would pass. While working on Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, Druckmann and game director Bruce Straley brainstormed a gameplay scenario called The Mute Girl, where emotional action was shared without speaking. It didn't end up in the final game, but the idea of characters bonding through action instead of dialogue became the dramatic backbone of Last of Us. Inspiration for the game included No Country for Old Men, The Road, City of Thieves, and BBC's Planet Earth, where they first saw the cause of the game's apocalypse, the parasitic cordyceps fungus. The next evolution of the game was called Mankind and included the cordyceps fungus / post-apocalyptic humanity elements, but it only affected women. Fortunately, someone in their diverse workforce pointed out why a game focused on killing mostly women might not be the best idea. About that fungus, there are over 400 species of cordyceps, and while all are parasitic, a number have medicinal uses, including one used to suppress organ rejection and transplants. However, there are some super creepy species, like Cordyceps ignota, which turns tarantulas into freakish walking spore dispensers. To make sure they fully exploited the biological possibilities, the team consulted Dr. David P. Hughes, assistant professor of etymology and biology at Penn State University. Druckmann's research on pandemics included the 1918 Spanish flu outbreak and the 1980 polio epidemic. The paranoia and blame, along with the human toll, made him realize The Last of Us might not call for a clear-cut bad guy. At the time, Tess was the main villain, bent on revenge after Joel betrays her by saving Ellie. She follows him for over a year, catches Joel, and is shot by Ellie, who returns to save him. But the writers couldn't justify why Tess would pursue them so far, or why Joel would suddenly be invested in Ellie when both were concerned with just surviving. It was a programmer who suggested bringing Marlene back to the ending, shifting the focus from emotional to philosophical. By bringing Marlene back, she's only a villain in blocking Joel while trying to save humanity. The idea was briefly floated that Ellie be Joel's daughter, but the writers quickly realized that that left the story nowhere to go. By having the two meet early in the game, Joel and the player share the same growing relationship with her. The opening scene was originally played as Joel, with him hearing it scream next door and running over, only to be attacked by an affected neighbor. One of the game designers said that seemed too predictable, and the idea of playing as his daughter, Sarah, came up. This not only made the opening outbreak more terrifying, but also made her death feel that much more brutal. At one point, there weren't even going to be any infected, just a post-apocalyptic world populated by wandering humans. But that meant gameplay was reduced to just hearing about a dangerous threat instead of actively participating in it. Druckmann said the main difference in writing for a video game is variables. Whereas a film is linear in presenting information, games incorporate player action and choice. To keep track of all the possible dialogue entries resulting from these choices, Druckmann used a color-coded Excel macro. Discovering these possibilities isn't just its own reward. In the new remastered edition of the game, listening to all 37 optional conversations unlocks a special trophy called I Want to Talk About It. Naughty Dog found out that the focus testers that Sony hired weren't going to include women in the test. They had to specifically request that for the game, which includes not only a female protagonist, but several female main characters, be tested with real-life female gamers. The same went for making sure Ellie was featured prominently on the box art. Naughty Dog was pressured to push Ellie to the back or feature feature Joel. Reasons vary, but there may be a misconception that games don't sell as well with a woman on the cover. The Naughty Dog team flat out refused and made sure Ellie was front and center. Kudos to the Naughty Dog team. The game's melee engine was designed to reflect the harsh world and brutal decisions that the characters live with. MMA fighters were used as a reference, but the physics were tweaked to allow longer pauses between hits for visual clarity, and less bounce back to make slams read more violent. Not that the mechanical design went smoothly. In fact, Naughty Dog thought that the game was going to tank due to numerous mechanical issues. Eventually, they were resolved not by fixing the problems, but by changing gameplay, a decision that worked out overall. The Last of Us and Uncharted 3 are theorized to take place in the same universe, with the Eldorado virus of the latter becoming the fungus disease of the former. The same Irish pub appears in both, and game designer Anthony Newman confirmed it's true. Though he seemed to be joking, what do you think? A small but important tweak to the game's camera made immersion even greater. Unlike Uncharted 3, The Last of Us has the character's body turn whenever the camera faces, subtly strengthening immersion. The Pittsburgh quarantine zone was modeled after photographer Robert Pelodari's book of post-Katrina New Orleans photographs after the flood. The idea was to capture the small bits of humanity devastated by a larger event. Other locations were inspired by The World Without Us, a book and documentary. They show how cities and suburbs would be reabsorbed by nature if humans were to disappear. The University of Eastern Colorado that Ellie and Joel visits isn't a real place, but its colors, green and gold, and bighorn sheep mascot are borrowed from the real Colorado State University. The game Firewatch pays tribute to The Last of Us with an Easter egg referencing the college. In one of the game's supply caches, there's a sweatshirt with the logo of the University of Eastern Colorado. Whatever else, the infected are not zombies. They're living people slowly infested by a parasitic fungus, and lead designer Michael Nolan went to great pains to show it. Using fungal infections and growths as references, he created the unique look of the creatures whose remnant humanity is debated within the game itself. The clickers were inspired by a 2020 special on blind children. The kids' casual use of echolocation was morphed into something deeply sinister for the infected, a stage where the fungus had blocked their vision, yet left them with a certain agency. The clicker's simple yet terrifying sound came from voice actress Misty Lee, who created a back-of-the-throat noise. Audio lead Phil Kovacs was able to imitate her and unintentionally became the voice of the male clickers. The sound's implications that the clickers are in pain or potentially aware of their infection made it all the more terrifying. For the bloaters, sound designer Eric Ocampo used recorded sounds of his baby son. He slowed one of the sounds down, and that became the groan they used. Eric said that this is a great example of why he records everything. He never knows how it will end up being used. Since most of the game takes place in outdoor environments, a major challenge for realism was creating natural lighting. Seems like a minor thing until you see characters casting flat black shadows. Without getting too technical, the game uses a unique global illumination system that accounts for light bouncing off of objects from specific directions. Direct light sources like the sun, torches, and gunfire are rendered dynamic in real time and cast their own shadows. The decision was made early on that gameplay would reflect the world of the characters. Supplies within the game are scarce, prompting players to question whether they should waste a bullet or chance a closer sneak encounter. Running away is also an option. The crafting feature also reflects this. Unlike most shooters where items are scattered and presented, you have to search every nook to save up enough supplies to craft something. True again to the world, the improvised items are either extremely close range like shivs or explosive to be tossed at a distance like Molotov cocktails and proximity mines. Composer Gustavo Santaolalla had plenty of experience in film, scoring 21 Grams, The Motorcycle Diaries, and winning 2 Academy Awards for his score of Brokeback Mountain and Babel. This was his first video game experience. Santaolalla doesn't actually know how to read or write music, but scores experimentally. For The Last of Us, he used instruments that he didn't know how to play, including a D-tone guitar, PVC pipes, and for the score, a ronroco, a string mandolin from the Andes region. Game director Bruce Stanley emphasized a minimalist approach to sound design to let the brutality in the story carry more. To that end, there are only 2 or 3 points in the game that use an orchestra. The rest is ambient, quieter scores. Not 1, but 2 Hank Williams songs were licensed for the game, Alone and Forsaken and I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive. Talk about setting the mood, guys. audio lead Phil Kovacs wanted to mimic nature as closely as possible to ground the game in reality. His team recorded footsteps in real puddles, dropped metal in the Morin headlands, and recorded the sound of treading the ponds outside Naughty Dog headquarters. Sound designer Jonathan Lanier utilized something called sound propagation to affect gameplay. By realistically creating audio that sounded as if it came from specific points, players knew where enemies were just by sound. The audio team chose not to use high dynamic range audio. Making it easier to hear quiet sounds made the experience less scary, so Lanier came up with the parametric dynamic range, where the dynamic range is driven based on the tension and mood of the game state. The character design of Ellie was tweaked to more closely resemble her voice actor Ashley Johnson, though it might have been because Ellie resembled Ellen Page a little too much, to the point that fans reached out to Ellen to congratulate her on her work. Miss Page politely redirected them. This also happens to be around the time that Page actually was starring in a video game, Beyond Two Souls. Joel was unabashedly based on Josh Brolin, specifically his performance in No Country for Old Men. So far, no complaints from Mr. Brolin. The team realized that typical game promotions and interviews risk giving away key points or being misinterpreted, so they came up with a solution: lie. When starting press tours, Drunkman said, "Here are things we will lie about in interviews. If somebody asks, do you play as Ellie? We would say no." But Naughty Dog nearly outed themselves back in 2011 when a forgotten Easter egg planted in Uncharted 3, scheduled to come out after the release of Last of Us, came out nearly a year earlier. Viral marketing for Last of Us had started, and a newspaper in Uncharted 3 specifically mentioned a viral fungal outbreak. Fortunately, Naughty Dog was known as a one-game studio, and the rumor was squashed. The official announcement of the game came on December 11th, followed by an industry announcement that they were a two-game studio just a day later. Whew, that was a close call. It was always a concern that gamers would perceive Ellie as a tedious escort quest. Creating an AI that made Ellie not just a believable character, but valued partner was extremely important. The best way to achieve this was to program close player proximity. In the words of programmer Max Dickoff, this had a triple effect. Ellie's actions could by definition be no dumber than the players, it increased opportunities for engaging or useful dialogue, and Ellie's constant presence reinforced the game's main relationship. Still, one of the few complaints about the game was that Ellie's magical ability was not seen standing in plain sight. There was also the occasional AI teammate shouting, "We need to be quieter," in near silent rooms. I mean, you can't win them all. You just can't. The Last of Us team was originally slated to work on a fourth entry in the popular Jak and Daxter series. The ideas they were interested in didn't mesh with the character's more fantastic world, nor did they want to force the character into a grittier world, so the idea was just scrapped. But the characters pop up throughout the game in a number of Easter eggs, including a Jak employee poster, small Jak and Daxter plush toys, a Jak and Dax board game in Pittsburgh, and in Left Behind, a Jak's Halloween costume, and a Jak's X combat racing arcade game. Playing the Jak X arcade game unlocks a special Nobody's Perfect trophy, an Easter egg within an Easter egg acknowledging fans' dislike of the 2005 racing game. For Ellie's character inspiration, Druckmann looked no further than the news. In ravaged war zones like Syria, Afghanistan, and the Gaza Strip, he found countless examples of kids being kids, playing games in ruin. The violent, ravaged world that they lived in is all that they and Ellie really have ever known. Ashley Johnson, the voice of Ellie, contributed to the character as well. While reading lines, Johnson would often suggest that Ellie should do more and be less helpless. As a result, Ellie became much more capable. One explanation for capability didn't make the cut. In the Last of Us Left Behind expansion game, Ellie stitches up Joel, saying that she's done this before and is kind of an expert. In an interview, Drunkman said that Ellie's role at a military school, pre-Left Behind, was stitching soldiers in the infirmary. Drunkman couldn't figure out where to fit the fact in, so all that remains is her line to Joel. Originally, Ellie wasn't going to shoot any non-infected until the very end of the game, but the team quickly realized that it didn't feel true for Ellie, or the world she lived in. The game begins in 2013 during the initial cordyceps outbreak, before skipping 20 years into the post-apocalyptic future of 2033. In the Pittsburgh section, a Daily Metro newspaper hints at an entire series of Uncharted movies, with an ad for Uncharted 13 starring Justin Bieber. Yep, we're all clamoring to see that one. Throughout the game, the design team subtly uses the color yellow to note where to explore and what to do. That includes Pittsburgh's iconic Fort Duquesne Bridge, which is as yellow as it is in real life. The suburbs section you run across notes from a character called Ish. The name has a double reference. The more obvious is Isherwood Ish Williams from the novel Earth Abides, who also establishes a group of survivors. There's also Moby Dick's Ishmael, a nod to Ish's fishing trawler. Joel and Ellie had last names at one point, Miller and Williams respectively. They were removed early on, though apparently they made it into a Japanese game manual. The only characters whose last name is officially revealed in Last of Us is that of Ellie's best friend, Riley Abel. Riley is mentioned only once in the original game, but her story expanded in an official 4-issue comic book called The Last of Us: American Dreams. It debuted in April 2013, 3 months before the game's release, and is a prequel focusing on Ellie's life inside of the quarantine zone. It tells the story of her and Riley's friendship and the stifling military environment they grew up in. Joel's original name was supposed to be Ethan, but the team felt it sounded too much like Nathan. The inspiration of both names? Joel and Ethan Coen, directors of the game's biggest influence, No Country for Old Men. They did give the name Ethan to a minor Firefly character near the game's end. Some ideas for the infected never made it past concept art. At one point, there was going to be an encounter with Joel and an infected elephant, but the idea seemed too distracting. There's a fan theory that the clickers' aggression is actually the last remnant of their humanity. Their deadly attacks, including trying to bite a chunk out of the neck, are meant to kill, but they spare spreading the infection of the disease further. The game's famous giraffe scene was inspired by a similar moment of joy and awe in Jurassic Park. The children and Dr. Grant sit in a tree and pet a surprisingly gentle dinosaur munching on leaves. Concept artist John Sweeney said the scene was originally a little tamer. Originally deer, then zebras, then the team finally settled on giraffes as the most elegant, remarkable animal that Ellie could encounter. They're not the only giraffes in the game. Foreshadowing the real deal, giraffes appear all over, including plush toys on beds, posters, and zoo ads on walls. Well-known game journalist Jeff Keighley even trolled Naughty Dog about it. While there was a ban on reviewing or talking about the game still in effect, Jeff took to Twitter to go on a giraffe-themed tangent. No one could tell him to stop without revealing the scene, but if you didn't already know, it just seemed bizarre. Well played, Jeff. You might have noticed a distinct building on the skyline as the giraffes go by. It's the Salt Lake Temple, part of the Mormon Church for Latter-day Saints. But there's actually no religious significance. Lead artist Nate Wells said that location just made sense geographically and it was a powerful visual. Now, a Catholic hospital downtown in the heart of Mormon country? The unlikelihood of it prompted a local paper to inquire, and Wells said that was intentional and the cross imagery was meant to convey hope of salvation. The world of Last of Us has female hunters, as seen in concept art and multiplayer mode, but in the original game, you'll only fight men. This wasn't due to concerns about misogyny and violence on part of the team. It all came down to running out of development time and memory. Originally set to come out on May 7, 2013, the game's release was moved to June 14th, allowing AI developers, programmers, and even writers to make last-minute tweaks and changes before shipping the game. One of those changes was a slight last chapter alteration with major emotional repercussions. Codenamed Real Lab, the original ending starts the same as the final product. Joel fights his way through the hospital to the operating room that Ellie's held in. To add player agency, the team added a doctor blocking Joel that they have to kill to proceed, and a new section where Joel must dodge his way out of the hospital carrying Ellie, unable to fight back. Another change was a POV switch for the Jackson County epilogue. Originally, the scene was played as Joel, but Ricky Cambier, designer of the Lakeside Resort level, suggested playing as Ellie instead. The distance created made hearing Joel's lie all the more devastating. The ending even had the team at Naughty Dog divided. Many were upset with the switch to a bleaker, ambiguous ending, though Drunkman said once the idea was fleshed out, it was easier to convince the naysayers. A lighter alternate ending turned it into a musical finale. During the last take of the day, Drunkman instructed voice actress Merle Dandridge to sing her lines as Marlene. The rest of the crew, completely unaware that would happen, followed suit, resulting in an all-singing operating room showdown. Who knew they had all such lovely voices? Since the game's release, Naughty Dog and the Last of Us fan community have celebrated September 26th as Outbreak Day. It's the day in game where the cordyceps outbreak reached critical mass near Austin, Texas. The alternate musical ending, new poster designs, and other treats have been officially released to commemorate it. According to a tweet by developer Mark Richard Davies, Joel's birthday is on Outbreak Day. In-game newspapers and calendars back this up as well. The most recent Outbreak Day gift gave more than fans realized. finalized. A poster commissioned by Mondo turned out to be very similar to the tattoo Ellie sports in the officially released The Last of Us Part 2 trailer. The tease was hiding in plain sight for over 3 months. A patch released on July 1st, 2013 covered more than just multiplayer updates. 2 phone numbers were removed from an in-game bulletin board ad for pest control. Turns out the fake numbers were very real sex hotlines. Yikes! Naughty Dog originally bent the truth about porting the game to a newer system, saying no plans for a PS4 version were in the works. In truth, the team had started work on a PS4 port as soon as they completed the PS3 version and sped up work on it when fans began asking for it. In July 2014, Sony released the updated game as Last of Us Remastered. It has higher 2080p resolution, a smoother frame rate, and includes the add-on chapter, The Last of Us Left Behind, among other features. Last of Us Left Behind cuts between the past, on the summer day that Ellie and Riley get bitten, and mid-game, when Ellie scavenges medicine for Joel's late-game injury. The chapter expands on Ellie and Riley's relationship and includes combat between hunters and infected, something that the writers had originally wanted in the main game, but didn't have time to include. Both Remastered and Left Behind include another update that's so minor you might have missed it at first. Twitter feeds and websites appear in both games, and they link to accounts and places you can look up. The accounts go from banal to grim pretty quickly, adding an unnerving touch of realism connecting the game to real life. 4 special editions of the game were released simultaneously along with the original. There was a Survival Edition and Pandemic Edition in the US, and a Joel and Ellie PAL Edition for Europe. The game was widely popular, selling over 7 million units in the first month. It went on to be the best-selling PS3 game of 2013 and currently sits in the top 5 best-selling PS3 games of all time. The game won 4 BAFTA, British Academy of Film and Television Awards, including Best Story, Best Game, and Best Performer for Ashley Johnson as Ellie. It garnered over 240 different Game of the Year awards. The game also has been praised by various LGBTQ groups for its inclusion of gay characters. There's also been quite a bit of debate about the kiss between Riley and Ellie in Last of Us Left Behind. Some people assumed that it was platonic, while GLAAD named Ellie one of their most intriguing LGBT characters of 2014. The final word should probably come from Druckmann himself. While he said he understands people's interpretations of the material, it was his intention that Riley and Ellie are gay. The nuance was also calculated. Druckmann said the photo booth scene in Left Behind must have gone through a dozen iterations and was as hard to create as the collapsing building in Uncharted 2 as far as resources, animation, and time spent on it. But it was necessary, so when players finished, they got a hint that this might be more than just a friendship. In keeping with the game's unique single-player mode, The Last of Us multiplayer mode also relies on teamwork, stealth, and careful use of resources. Called Faction, players choose the side of either hunters or fireflies. A recent multiplayer update called Interrogation requires players to, yep, you probably guessed it, interrogate opposing team members to locate resources instead of killing them. It's a lot more tactical that way. As a fan treat and a way to say goodbye to the project he spent 4 years on, Druckmann wrote and directed the show The Last of Us One Night Live, performed a year after the game's release date. The show featured the game's voice actors acting out dramatic scenes from the game, and composer Gustavo Santaolalla performing songs from the score. It also featured an epilogue written specially for the show. The scene takes place 3 weeks after the game's ending, with Joel and Ellie safely at his brother Tommy's enclave. Joel brings Ellie a guitar, and after singing her a song, promises to teach her how to play it. In March 2014, Sony announced that Screen Gems would distribute a film version of Last of Us, produced by Sam Raimi and written by Druckmann. But you shouldn't hold your breath for good news anytime soon. Raimi himself said the film is stuck in development hell, and there's not much he can do about it. Druckmann and Sony have very different versions of the film, and it doesn't look like they'll be able to reconcile anytime soon. A sequel was accidentally all but confirmed as early as August 2015. At a Naughty Dog live stream, writer Josh Shear referred to the first Last of Us. Did he say the first? He quickly backtracked, but you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. To everyone's relief, PlayStation officially announced The Last of Us Part 2 in December 2016. Details have been scarce, but Druckmann confirmed the game is set 5 years after the first and that Ellie is the lead character. He also said where the first game was about love, the second game will be about hate. This all fits with a currently popular fan theory that Joel is dead in The Last of Us Part 2, and his appearance to Ellie is a figment of her imagination. Bruce Straley, director of Part 1, has taken a year sabbatical and won't be working on Part 2. Westworld actress Shannon Woodward has joined the Part 2 cast, though her role is currently unknown. Another Westworld sequel connection. Westworld writer Haley Gross is also involved working with Naughty Dog on the script for the upcoming game. A teaser for The Last of Us 2 was released in December 2016, which shows Ellie singing a cover of Through the Valley by Shawn Jeffers and the Shapeshifters as she strums a guitar. The cover sets up the tone for the sequel to be even more ominous than the previous. The sequel already won its first award, PlayStation's most anticipated game of the year 2016. There you have it. Once again, I'm Darrian P. Mack, and thanks for watching 107 Facts about Last of Us. Are you going to play the sequel? Did we miss anything? Comment down below and let us know. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. And if you like getting more out of your game, subscribe to the Leaderboard, your home for video game facts.